Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer 1745 here with my continuing playthrough of Hearts of Iron 4 with BlackICE Total War submod of that. We're of course playing as Britain this series. So let's continue this. We're rapidly trying to get through 1936. Not yet training any new units, but mostly I'm trying to get development in Canada. Good. Trying to get some medium HQ equipment we're producing. Medium artillery and anti-aircraft. So, let's reduce this a little bit. Now let's see, Horlican guns, yes. Get that in production. Okay, well, mountain, yes. Okay, so we're doing artillery. We need to be bigger than that quick fire. That. I think they mean this. There we go, put both of these in production. Good. And new national focus. Okay. Chinese Soviet Republic declared war on the Ma clique. Okay. That's interesting. That'll be something different. Yeah, let's go down this. Colonial elites, and we also used up some political power. Well, let's check out our naval function. The tribal class and the I class. I don't know if I've specifically heard of the eyeball. I know I've heard of the tribal, so we're gonna go with the tribal. Oh well, let's see. Try to see what the different. Okay, this has better evasion. Much better torpedo. The tribal has better naval firepower. Let's go with that. The I class. And we can improve our setup here. Oh! King Edward abdicates. Prime Minister Baldwin has made it quite clear that the dignity of the King Emperor will be impinged if he were to marry not just a commoner but also a divorcee, and if it was not bad enough, an American. After much soul-searching, His Majesty has chosen love over duty and chosen to abdicate. His younger brother Albert will assume the mantle as King George the Sixth. London bookmakers are already taking odds on whether the shy man will make it to his own coronation. Ah, that's an interesting picture of the Japanese surrender below it. Don't know what that has to do with this. Okay. It wasn't over marrying a divorcee. My opinion, that's BS. Excuse me. Some Brits would have cared about that, significantly. It wasn't obviously the done thing, but do you think it's like marrying a divorcee or imprisoning your wife and then openly having mistresses while you've imprisoned your wife a bigger deal? That's what earlier English kings did in the late 18th century, early 19th century era, and other sort of extreme behaviors. If you look at some of the Gilray cartoons of the time period, you'll see that there wasn't very much dignity in the English monarchy. That's for sure. So, and definitely by the beginning of the 20th century, middle class values, shall we say, might be a value neutral term, had come into vogue, because the upper class, they didn't care about this, and the lower class didn't care about this within Britain. Britain is a class society. Classes are different than something like the Hindu caste system. You can move around in classes, but if you look at the British monarchy, you look at the British society, mid-19th century really, if not a bit before, it really starts to change its sort of moral compass to the middle class and their sort of middle class values, if you will. Their prudishness on many elements and other things like this. So the real issue is not is she a divorcee or that she's an American. It is partly who she is. Wallis Simpson would not have made a good English queen. So it's partially on who she is, specifically her. But also it is who Edward surrounds himself with. It wasn't, we look today and we see right wing and left wing, and of course, if you don't know, but I presume most of you watching know this, it's the right and left sides of the the Estates General of the French. I don't know if Parliament would be exactly the right term, but the French. Sorry if I'm getting some of this bit wrong in titles and whatnot, but the French legislature under the monarchy, and the supporters of the king were on the right and the non-supporters were on the left. That's where we get right and left. Fascism ideology is rooted in the left. National Socialism, Nazism, is an ideology also rooted in the left. Where it differs from revolutionary socialism or communism, or the more, and it varies in degrees, but the social democratic or democratic, social or democratic socialists, those are the gradualists. They both theoretically, the revolutionaries and the gradualists, both believe that theoretically eventually you're going to get to the same end state of communism someday. It's a speed question, and how to get there roadmap question is my understanding is the difference between them. Now, of course, there's a lot of people that are not like, hey, I'm a liberty person, but I'm not a fanatic about it. I think we need a police force. I think we need an army. you know, you can talk to a degree. So I will grant that not everyone who calls himself a socialist is against ownership of the means of production by individuals. Because even a lot of communists believe in ownership of an individual thing by, you know, a person, but that is like an ownership of a piece of clothing, a vase, a thing you can sort of hold that, you know, you can own, but that's not. Communists don't believe that individuals can own the means of production, which would be a farm, which would be a factory, any sort of major means of production. A communist or a full-on socialist believes that those are collectively held and cannot be individually held. Again, not all, and I want to say this, not all socialists believe that, but the general democratic socialist idea is to get to that state someday eventually. Okay, so where the communist and the democratic socialist differ from the fascist and the national socialist, and there's multiple areas, but the main area comes in a national identity is extolled as a virtue with fascism and national socialism, where the other two, the communists and the socialists, are internationalists, the universally of mankind, you know, one world government, one sort of central setup. That's sort of where they, one of their major differences. And another major difference is religion. Fascism generally supports Christianity. National Socialism is a neo-paganistic religion. So they have a religious base. The socialists, generally speaking, and definitely the communists, don't believe in God, and they believe religion is a danger to society. So there are a lot of right-wingers in Britain, as in other countries, and the collapse of the old order at the end of World War I shakes a lot of them. A bunch of them, and particularly in Britain, still hold because there's still a king, there's still significant royal authority. Kings and royal authorities are not incompatible with a democratic representative body like a parliament. You can have both. And a lot of people that support a king and a social hierarchy also support a democratic body within the government. So, but you get a lot of these people, and so in Britain, that a lot of them still hold on, but a lot of them go, the old system isn't working, and we need a new way to fight against the communists and the socialists. So a lot of them start flirting with fascism and Nazism. And this is where you start getting the problems with Edward. Yes, I know it's a long way to get there. And those that aren't used to me, well, my circuitous, my long time to get to the point at times. But so Edward is surrounding himself by a lot of these neo-right, fascistic, national socialistic types. Some may very much believe that is the best way. Others may just believe we need something to counteract communism. And so there is significant evidence that his red boxes, meaning the government secret papers, are left unattended, and it is known that some of the people around him are not working in the interests of Britain at the time. So state secrets are being potentially leaked. We don't know exactly what got leaked when, but we know it isn't a good thing that this was going to continue. That is really at the core of Edward's need for abdication, who his wife specifically is, and the friends that he keeps. So, no, it took a while to get there. We got early sonar, good. Let's see, we can... Let's see, let's do, because we are starting to research a ship. Now, I don't know why well, Vickers Armstrong, in my mind, is the primary shipbuilder for Britain. Don't know if one of these is sort of a localized version of Vickers Armstrong. I don't know the company well enough. Vickers Armstrong is one of the major armaments manufacturers. They basically go away eventually. The company, or some of their assets, are owned by a few modern arms manufacturers today, but that are sort of inherited some of the Vickers Armstrong element. But they were a massive. Vickers Armstrong is a massive gun maker, you know, as in like big guns, and ships, yes, and tanks, and other things. Yeah, Leland also did some tank production. Now, once the war sort of gets going, a lot of these guys, I'm sure, all contributed to it. Rolls-Royce engines, I know very much so. They also had the Rolls-Royce armored car coming out of World War One. But let's see. So let's look at it more from a increased range, increased speed. It's good. Armor, naval gun carrier armor. I don't know that we need armor much. Don't know that we might. John Brown and Company. Okay, they keep build costs down, but quality goes downhill too. Range, so we don't probably want to do that. Deck size for carriers. Max range. Well, that's for the screen. This is for capital ships. And screen. Okay. Not quite as far range. Sub-detection not as good. Yeah, we'll go with Harlan and Wolf. Pacific designer. Okay, well, this is because we just finished with what's the date? What's the problem with these? Okay, so these are all, I don't know why these wouldn't. Britain definitely was doing sonar earlier. Okay, well, yeah, we'll do this. We want to protect our lifelines for Britain. Now, as I talked on the beginning of the first episode, I am currently streaming this while making this on Twitch. So, by the time you hear this on... let's see if there's anything over here. Okay, what do we want to do? I knew there was stuff over here, but what do we want to do now? I'm sort of going to wait to get some of the Blenheim. Where is... Oh, damn, no I didn't. Bristol Blenheim. Oh, stop this. Oh, stop this. Damn it. Okay. Well, let's go through these. Okay. First Armored Division was formed in November 1937. Well, we're nowhere near November. On the initiative of General Sir Archibald Montgomery Massingford, the Chief of Imperial General Staff. At the time it was initially named the Mobile Division. Sure, we'll take that. Okay, Public Order Act of 1936 banned the wearing of political uniforms in any public place or public meeting. It also required the police consent for political marches to go ahead. The act also prohibited organizing, training, or equipping an association of persons for the purpose of enabling them to be employed in usurping the functions of the police or the armed forces of the crown. or for the use or display of physical force in the promoting of any political object. Excuse me. The act had the indirect results of actually improving the stance of the BFU, or BUF, sorry. Messed that up. British Union of Fascists, I know what it stands for. Their forced abandonment of paramilitary and armed tactics improved the party's relation with the police, and in making it more respectable, increased the BUF's appeal among the traditionally conservative middle-class citizens who became the party's main base in the years after the Public Order Act of 1936 passed. Yes, the BUF is a very interesting group, and I want to dig deeper into it in time. It definitely starts coming out from the left as a reaction to various elements of the left, as I was talking earlier, thinking that the communists are going too far in the sense of no private ownership of the means of production. Now the fascist believes that the means of production need to be used for the benefit of the state. It can be privately owned, or it can be government owned, but it needs to be function for the benefit of the state and the nation's people as well. The state is the people, so you can sort of use that in the fascist terminology equally back and forth. So the means of production need to be for the benefit of the state, but a reasonable, as deemed reasonable by the fascists, profit can be made. So individuals, whether it's stockholders, it could be a mom and pop somewhere own, a single share of Vickers Armstrong, or it could be literally one person owning a huge corporation, or any variant amongst that. That is fine with the fascists. It just, they got to do what's good for the nation, not necessarily what is good for the business. Now, so that's coming out with the fascist thing. But early on, as you're seeing, a lot of the mass membership of the fascists are looking for the same people that the communists and socialists are looking for the membership, the workers. So they're looking at the workers to get that as a means of production. So there's a lot of conflict between the two of them, because they're trying to get they're trying to vie for the same membership. Now, coming out of the British tradition, which America has, there is a dislike of uniforms. Part of that is authority. Part of that is part of the name, is uniformity, and the sort of mental idea that you must conform to it. Those are elements that are not traditionally in the British cultural mix. So, because status in Britain is different than status in other countries, and so having it so well defined, and then defining your role by your uniform, that very much is in different cultures, not so much in Britain. So the sort of middle class in Britain is put off by this. You will find a lot of the supporters, particularly women supporters of the fascists, were the suffragettes. There was a movie about some British suffragettes. I haven't seen it yet. It's been out for a long time. A lot of the suffragettes, I'm not saying a majority, but a lot of the suffragettes, and some of the famous ones from, these are now older women, not old and wheelchair women, but not 20-somethings. These are now the 40-somethings, the 50-somethings women. Are very active, very vehement fascists. A lot of the, because they see it as breaking down some of the old, as they would say it, outdated traditions of Britain with the fascist movement. So they are definitely coming out of the out of the middle class type views. So there is this sort of middle class element with the BUF, but you know, it's never gets huge support. It gets significant support, but it in and of itself is or well, not just, well, there's the BUF, but there are other factions, including some National Socialist or Nazi factions. The BUF very much, and Mosley very much, looks to Mussolini as his model, not Hitler. They're Mussolini-ists, if you will. I mean, they don't. If you read some of their, now see, this is something I can do, is read some of the BUF's propaganda, because it's in English, where I get sort of translations and bits and pieces of fascism and Nazism, the actual propaganda, not what other writers have said about it. They are definitely not at its core some massively anti-Jewish organization, but they are anti-capitalist, and that's sort of conflated there. So yeah, let's see, no need. Yeah, we will do so, because we'll reduce fascism and communism support. I'll let the Blenheims go. It's 37 already in January, just barely, but yeah. Now how are we doing for productions, I think? So we're getting some medium artillery produced. And also, well, we are producing HQ equipment, but more slots have opened up for some more ships. Or subs, or whatever. Let's get these ships produced. Bomber workshops, very good, and truck workshops, good. So now we're in 37. We want to So if you're watching this on YouTube and you want to see the next episode of this early, before it's on YouTube, get over to my Twitch channel, because I will very likely have streamed it live, and we're going to do this here to improve the British Raj, and they will be up for a while there as well. And you will see, if you will, something of a semi-unedited version of this. Not quite, because I stop and start this recording that you're watching on YouTube after I've started the Twitch stream. Can't do both exactly simultaneously, so you see a little bit more of the setup. But on the Twitch stream, you can, of course, skip ahead a bit of it if it me sort of getting things rolling. Submarine workshops. Okay, now this is, again, let's see, we're going to come here. And so just come on to Twitch. That's the Twitch website, gamer_1745, easy to find if you don't want to follow one of the links. So you can do that. Nope, we're saving the first of the month. Come over, follow me on Twitch, which will get you updates of when I'm streaming live. but the will be up um, early, or before it is on YouTube, so you can watch the next episode if you are wanting to see what happens next before it's released on YouTube. So it's early access. And of course, if you're subscribed or followed on Twitch, you can get notifications of when I'm live. And I would love to have you come on and chat with me while I make these episodes. Probably won't go, well, you know me, I do go off topic, but probably won't go hugely off topic, but I'd love to talk to you about what we are seeing and doing here. While making it. Okay, so got the Matilda Mark II. And for its day, in my opinion, a really good tank. Not a great tank, but a really good tank for its day. 1936 to 1940, that kind of framework, really good tank. Still don't know what the Selma S35 is doing here, and that doesn't look like one. That looks like some other thing, but I don't know what that is. See that here, this heavy thing, that is maybe, you know, Vickers Armstrong thing. More like it's coming out of World War I or no war era. Tilda light tanks, Valentine. Well, let's do medium tank 1. Okay, we're still trying to catch up on anti-aircraft guns. Mountain artilleries, rifles, we're still only at 4,000 plus. Okay, the I-class. Well, let's go with King George V. And we have more slots free. Naval warfare, or naval production, I should say. Trying to do some concentration here. Okay, so we've improved the British Raj some. Still got those to do, but I think we should go down this road. You have to realize also at this time frame there is, in Britain specifically, a lot of social chaos. There are significant strikes, including some minor strikes, and some of them are a bit more in the 34, 35 time frame, but they're continuing on. As you get closer to World War II, there's fewer of the major strikes. Still do happen, but fewer of them. But you're getting a lot of that going on. There's very much of a pacifist movement going on, and how do I say some of this stuff? There's also a call for armament Lady Euston, very famously, was working really hard to get Britain to arm up at this time period, 36, 37. So that's all going on. Okay, well, we now have stock. We have no ability to improve the quality that we're going to produce. Royal Navy, Admiral class. Got the I class there. Yeah, since we designed it, let's put it into production as the rest fall away. Now, how do I put this? I know I've talked about this in other series, and I think this is an important element to think. And we have to, even to this day in 2017, World War I and its effects are still, well, I was going to say massively, are still significantly influencing us to this day. And it is the most, well, at the time it was the most traumatic thing that had happened to civilization since the fall of Constantinople to the Turks. World War I was that big of a thing. So, and if you don't understand how big of a shock to the world civilization the fall of Constantinople to the Turks was, you need to study more history. But so it was the most significant thing. World War II, I could argue World War I is more of a shock to the system, in that World War I, or how World War I ended, basically caused World War II. So if you look at it as cause and immediate effect, sort of one sort of big event, then definitely, as both World War I and World War II sort of put together, that is most assuredly the biggest, most significant effect on humanity since, I don't know, the rise of the Mongol Empire, or the true fall of the, if you will, Western Roman Empire, or whatever. If you're separating the two, World War I and World War II, World War II is probably a bit more of an effect, but only just a bit, I would say. So you have this massive social reaction to World War I, and for most people, it's the sheer destructiveness of war hits people, and so, you know, pacifism. We got to have peace. We can't have war. Hey, I understand not wanting to go to war. I understand not wanting to have millions of people die. That is a perfectly reasonable stance to have. Now, I can also see that people go, oh, well, peace is good, but what kind of peace? You know, peace for Ireland while Poland burns? If you know what I mean, you know, or do you get involved, or you know, at what price peace? But I can understand, you know, now I'm not talking about what price peace as in somebody's directly attacking you. This is where the pacifists, I think, fall down, is that they don't ever see war as an option. They would rather see, they'd rather be put in a death camp and killed than go to war, which to me, anybody who's a true pacifist thinks that the Holocaust and the gulags of the Soviet Union, oh, they're fine, you know, hey, it's all right to kill millions of people so long as you don't do it in war. No, can't have war, but we'll submit to Hitler, and we'll give up any number of people to Hitler's death camps just so we don't have war, I think is a terrible, terrible viewpoint. I know there's the Quakers and a few other religious groups that are just religiously against pacifism. I think pacifism at that level of not willing to defend yourself is a crime, because it's like, oh, sir, you just entered my house. Oh, you're going to rape and murder my wife. Well, don't worry, I'm a pacifist. I won't protect my wife. I would prefer you not to do it, but I'm never going to harm you. You can kill you're going to also kill my kids too. Don't worry, I'm not going to harm you. That is an insane position. The position that you're not going to defend yourself against attack. And there's people who advocate that. I don't know if most people, if it actually came to some sort of attack like that, that they would truly remain a pacifist. And if you go, well, that's what Jesus taught. Man, some of Jesus' followers during Jesus' lifetime carried a sword. Okay? Jesus was not against self-defense. Jesus gave himself up to the state when a cohort, so if you look at one of the translations of it, when a cohort showed up for him, that's like 500 men, but it's never full strength, so it's probably 200 men showed up at the Garden of Gethsemane. Roman soldiers or Roman auxiliaries showed up to arrest them. He surrendered himself? Yes, because at that point it was futile. It's like, oh, you mean you just had 50 biker gang guys coming in to rape your family? Well, at some point, resistance is futile. Maybe you still do it, maybe you don't. But maybe if you don't resist, they're just going to rape your wife and not kill her. At some point, resistance doesn't work. But earlier incidents was with one person that you would have a chance of defending it. So, the idea of pacifism is that this viewpoint that developed after World War I, that warfare was caused by armaments manufacturers and war profiteers. And again, if you watch me a lot, you'll talk about the famous play of Annie, the little girl. Who is the rich daddy that comes to sort of save her? Daddy Warbucks. It's often short and contract. Daddy Warbucks, as if it's like Wainwright or Goldsmith, or sort of a contraction of an old English compound word name, Daddy Warbucks. No, it was clearly understood. It was Daddy Warbucks, Daddy War Profiteer, Daddy makes money off of dead people guy. That's who he is. This was entered into at least Western culture of war profiteers causes wars. So the way to stop wars is to stop building armaments so they don't get rich, so that you don't have wars. Well, this is a complete effing fallacy. It just is not true, because we will see somebody, Hitler, Stalin, to put two personal names on it, but groups, or Mongol hordes. Obviously the Mongol people at this day aren't like planning on rising up and taking over the world, but somebody, Islamic hordes, somebody out there, Kim Il Un, Kim Il Sung, the current Kim Un. You think, oh, if we all disarmed, he wouldn't have nuclear weapons and he wouldn't be threatening the world. He would just be the newest barbarian out there if we didn't arm to oppose him. So again, I understand a reasonable thing is there's a war going on somewhere in the world. Well, we, whoever we are, could be the U.S., could be Iceland, don't need to go get involved in that war. I get that idea that we don't want to go to war in every instance. I totally get that idea. And in cases, I agree with it. It depends on the situation. It's not, for me, a blanket yes or no. But the idea that you disarm, you don't have armaments, means that you're being peaceful or you're improving the chances of peace, is completely counterproductive. Now, World War II shows this up and discredits the peace movement in the world. It just flatly discredits it. Then there's another thing that sort of revises it in a different form, in the anti-nuclear movement, okay? Got to get rid of these nuclear weapons. Do we really want to get rid of nuclear weapons? Are you sure that if you could do magic button and all nukes are gone, you would take that bet? And no one else could build new ones? I don't mean that, then Denmark could build them and take over the world. I mean, no one would have them? Are you sure? Due to direct warfare, though of course we have the Islamic things that are causing lots of death and violence, but I don't know whether nuclear weapons are ultimately saving more people by not being used, but the possibility of them being used, versus the what would be going on with tanks and battleships and, I'm not talking World War II stuff, I'm talking about modern stuff, fighter, jet fighters and all these stuff, what that would be causing if we didn't have nuclear weapons. Where would Putin's borders be today if there wasn't nuclear weapons? Would it be here at this stage of the Soviet Union? Would it be the Soviet Union where sort of here, with that? Would it be the Warsaw Pact? Where would the borders be without nuclear weapons? I don't know. I'm not sure. I can't say for sure the world would be better off without nuclear weapons. That does not mean that I want to start throwing nuclear weapons everywhere. Well, maybe a couple. I can think of a couple of nukes that I might drop, literally. But for me, thinking of dropping them would ultimately, as I would see it, would save more lives than it would take. But, those are possible future conflicts versus actual conflicts of the day. So that's a tough question. So, but that sort of shows up. But what is the reality behind the anti-nuclear and the continued pacifist movement? The reality behind it is enemies of your country, whoever's country you may be, because they are only trying to get the idea out that you can't or shouldn't fight at any case, so it allows the enemies of your country to run rampant around parts of the world. So, and it still goes on. There's still the anti-war movement. Now, there's a difference between being a pacifist or anti-war than being anti a particular war. Again, it goes back to, I can totally understand, and I agree with it wasn't fought well, but I can totally understand, hey, get out of Vietnam. Okay, that's a reasonable, again, whether you think it's the right answer or not, or the right thing to do, but let's get out of Vietnam. Okay, that is different than being blanket pacifist movement. And that is also clearly that that once you get out of Vietnam, the other side is going to win. So you're now rooting for the other side. Now you may honestly believe, because there's a lot of good, honest Americans that want us out of Afghanistan. And they're on both the right and the left. And they want us out of Afghanistan because Afghanistan is the graveyard of empires. And they think it's going to help everybody out if the U.S. gets out of Afghanistan. I totally get that. And I don't want any soldiers in Afghanistan, but I think we need some there. Now, like I say, if you are not just saying intellectually and commenting on the news, saying that we should leave Afghanistan, that's one thing. It's another thing to get out there and try to undermine the nation's morale when dealing with Afghanistan. And that's like massive protests, massive actions. That kind of stuff, in my opinion, only helps and fuel your enemies. So there's a difference between calling for something in an intellectual and public way than trying to shut down government and society and trying to get it. Again, another long-winded talk. I hope it's informative. But see, this is all going on in Britain right now. And that's why I get there. This is sort of, and I'm trying to relate it to modern day events, this is what's going on in Britain. And of course we have the Hindenburg disaster, whatever. I do believe it was just a it was either what you would call a natural disaster in that it just happened, or a man-caused disaster in that they filled a big balloon full of hydrogen, one of the most flammable substances on Earth, and put people up in it and put it in the air, and knowing that, oh, well, eventually it's going to blow up in big flames. And that's what will happen with all hydrogen-filled Zeppelins. Eventually, they'll blow up in big flames. Now, of course, you can take them out of service, like LZ-128, which was the Graf Zeppelin 1. You can take them out of service before they blow up in flames. Or the LZ-30, Graf Zeppelin 2, that was taken out of service before it went up in flames. So you can take them out. Okay, Supermarine Spitfire, Fighter Agility Carrier. That's probably where we're going to go. But yeah, let's go with Supermarine. Foreign Secretary. Okay, now here we have the choice, and I'm going to have to read through some of these between appeasement and containment. Appeasement is giving into your enemies. Containment is confronting your enemies, but without attacking them. Now, that could mean they'll attack you, and so there's a difference. Now, obviously, Britain did go briefly for appeasement in the Munich situation. But then they later switched, so I don't think we can switch with national focuses. None that I've seen. Not that I maybe can't be contributed. Or modded eventually. Yeah, let's go with containment. Like what, again, we are doing today with North Korea is containment. Even when we sort of... This will hurt us a little bit with factory production, but this will speed it up a little bit, not quite as much as it hurt. But we'll do that. Paris exhibition. Yes, this was a big, huge event in Paris for, like, I don't know, what is it, a month or something. Maybe a bit longer. That's the, oh, damn. So, because I'm jumping back and forth between Hearts of Iron 4 and Hearts of Iron 3, they have different sort of pausing and starting processes, and I'm thoroughly confused. Okay, this building here, and you can see the sort of size of people right down there. This huge building here is the German pavilion. Big tall thing designed by Albert Speer. Forget who I may even say here, but this one here with the person holding up the sickle and the hammer is the Soviet pavilion. They're directly opposite of each other. Now these other places here are other pavilions, and these are all buildings built, temporary buildings. I mean, they were all torn down at the end of this. Not that they weren't necessarily substantial buildings, concrete and other things, but they were all built to be temporary for this, to show off nations. If you look at, now, Europeans, you already know this, of course, because you live there, and most of you know your basic geography. But Americans, and I know this is being funny and not you who watch this, but, hey, haven't looked up at my thing. Hey, Stoli46, good to see you. Yep. we won't be going on to war until we are defending some good allies. So, and this is definitely a British game. And for those of you who have recently joined the stream, this is the new Hearts of Iron 4 playthrough for my YouTube series. Just sharing it early access here on Twitch. So, so get back to my joke that I've messed up the flow of. But to you Americans, and again, I know this isn't you who watch this channel, but this is Europe. It is a place outside of the U.S. Europe is not a country, it is a continent. Okay. Yeah. And if you think I'm being ridiculous, if you know about the current American public education system, and most people out there, if you gave them a blank map and say point to Europe, I'd be shocked if more than 30% would accurately point to Europe. And all I'm talking about university graduates. I'm not talking about, I don't know, hicks out in the deserts or something. I'm talking about university graduates. They don't know this stuff. But Paris is fairly centrally located. Obviously, it's a bit far for someone from Poland or Romania, and it's hugely accessible if you look at for most people's means of transportation via the train. And if you're sort of a middle-class person, and it really is sort of focused for the middle class that are going to be travel from, say, London to Paris can theoretically be done as a day trip, but it's more go there, maybe sleep on the boat train or the boat that it goes across or something, and get to Paris, spend the day there, and then spend, so it can be sort of done in a weekend. So you can do it as a cheap weekend vacation. So going for a few months, again, so that would argue that people from Brussels or from Belgium, Amsterdam, Italy, Switzerland, Spain, if it wasn't in the middle of a civil war, can easily get to Paris fairly cheaply. So this is a very important, very centrally located way to show off your country. There are definitely countries outside of Europe that have pavilions there. Don't know a whole lot about those. I've mostly studied the German one. That's a big success. Okay. The Marco Polo Bridge incident. This is an incident. Now, as I've been looking a bit more into Japan and China recently, and looking more into Manchukuo and the Soviet Union and Manchukuo and China, there was a lot of ongoing, and this is starting in the early 30s, a lot of ongoing incidents between the different nations, and sometimes they're with Japanese troops, often they're with Manchukuo or other sort of puppet type troops, and Japan is always prompting either them or their puppet forces to probe, if you will, to have clashes, and I'm talking into the hundreds, like with the Soviet border clashes. And I think to some degree, if you look at the border out here, some of it might be fairly well defined along some rivers, but others aren't, and it wasn't even necessarily that all the rivers are as agreed upon it, and these rivers are sort of often in deltas or things, meaning little islands in the center and things like this. So there's a lot of shooting going on, not necessarily a lot of death, but patrols shooting each other or at each other, firing some guns at each other. Again, doesn't always mean that anybody's going to die. Just, hey, I think we're on our side, you think you're on your side, and we shoot at each other and go away. So this is ongoing thing, including an ongoing thing in this part of the world as well, not just up with the Soviets. But China reacts at this time because the Marco Polo Bridge is a bridge just outside of Beijing. I might have a hard time, if it wasn't labeled, to find it on a map of Beijing, which river, which bridge, but it's fairly old and fairly substantial bridge. And the Chinese react to it in a significant way, because they've already, as they see it, they've seen Manchukuo, not just a puppet state, but what they would see as part of China, Manchuria. The Manchus, or the Manchurians, were the last emperors of China. So they were sort of the northern barbarian, Chinese barbarians, not Mongolian really, but they were sort of the northern, sort of like Macedonians were, of Alexander the Great's time, were sort of Greek, but barbaric Greek that conquers Greece. That's sort of what the Manchus were to China, and especially if you get down into the Cantonese speaking down here, these northerners were far off distant barbarians. Now they were Chinese, so that they weren't like Europeans or some other sort of truly alien barbarians, but these were sort of the rough type barbarians that came down and conquered China. So they already sort of see that this is sort of a break away from a united China. We have all of these little cliques here sort of set up as countries, and a bunch of the players here of Hearts of Iron 4 complain about this because they're not separate countries, and none of these people really thought of themselves as separate countries. And they're very right about that. And the idea of these flags are sort of good examples, in that they were all sort of using the nationalist flags. They all more or less wore nationalist uniforms. Some of them were more loyal and some of them were less loyal to the central government, but even those that were loyal to the central government, they were sort of political military type peoples, in which they had a political control aspect in their region. So meaning they couldn't, Chiang Kai-shek couldn't just, I'm going to take General X here and give him a command up here. You could maybe ask General X to move a few of his divisions up here to help deal with, I don't know, the communists or the Japanese or somebody else, but you couldn't order them, you couldn't fire them. So they were sort of cliques or other factions, generally speaking, at this point within nationalist China, but there was still fighting amongst them, and especially and I don't know if this we'll see this coming up. I think it's in later 37 or maybe this time or whatever, I'm lousy on dates, is when we have the one of the cliques, I forget which one, I think it's this one, the Xiang clique or whatever, captures when he's visiting Chiang Kai-shek, just sort of like, hey, we're going to capture you. And what they were trying to sort of do is force them to sign some sort of peace agreement with the People's Republic of China or the communists or whatever. So the Chinese react bigger than normal, but this is also an event that, like I say, was generally an ongoing provocations, but that the Japanese decide to make a lot instead of standing back, say, oh, yep, there was an incident. Oh, yep, you've moved your divisions up to the border and shot back across the bridge or something. Instead of like sort of retreating back a little bit and not pushing any harder, the Japanese start stoking the fire and start pushing. So this is interesting times indeed, and that's interesting times is not a good thing in China. Okay, Stanley Baldwin resigns. That's this guy. 2 weeks after the coronation of George VI, Mr. Baldwin has announced that he will resign the premiership in order to retire at the age of 70. Having led the national government on and off since 1923, he has been a steady hand responsible for bringing the British Empire out of the Great Depression. The recent years have reluctantly overseen the beginning of imperial rearmament and the abdication of Edward VIII. He stepped down as a popular and successful prime minister, but he has done, read this better, enough to counter the growing threat from, but has he done? Okay. So we'll get Neville Chamberlain in, I guess. Yes, there's Neville Chamberlain. Okay, well, we're going to end the episode here. You on the stream, you can stay put. We're going to be making another episode in just a moment, so just stay here. Oh, and Kevalu, this is BlackICE, or Black Iron Crown Edition is the technical name, but BlackICE for Hearts of Iron 4 with the Total War sub-mod to it, which goes in and changes a bunch of stuff. Don't have a lot of familiarity with this. mod, so we're sort of trying out, taking a look at it, see how it works, and see how it's at variance from standard BlackICE. So you guys on the stream just hang out. It's going to keep going here. We'll be starting a new episode very soon. So I want to thank all of the YouTube viewers for watching. Thank you for liking the videos, and please post your comments on YouTube.